In the vast, unyielding expanse of the Milky Way, countless civilizations thrived, each more advanced than the last. They spread across the stars with the confidence of their technology, their strength, and their ruthless efficiency. To them, the human race was a blip, insignificant, fragile, and barely deserving of notice. Yet, when the greatest war in the history of the galaxy erupted, it was the humans, the weakest species, who would change the course of history. The war had begun nearly a century earlier, when the forces of the Kramari Empire, a race of towering, bioengineered giants, began their expansion across the galaxy. Their empire was vast, their technology unparalleled. They possessed weapons that could vaporize entire planets and fleets of ships that were practically invincible. With every star system they conquered, their arrogance grew. They considered themselves the rightful rulers of the galaxy, and any species that dared resist was quickly crushed beneath their boots. The first blow came when the Kramari Empire laid waste to the entire Korna Federation, reducing its rich worlds to radioactive ashes. As the Korna people fell, a ripple of fear spread across the galaxy. The other empires, the Vorten, the Thainir, and the Merak, all locked themselves away in defensive postures, preparing for the inevitable onslaught. But none had the strength or the desire to challenge the Kramari. And then came Earth, the small, insignificant blue world that had only recently joined the galactic community. The humans had barely begun to explore the stars when the Kramari turned their eyes toward it. Their ships appeared in the orbit of Earth like a blackened storm cloud, their weapons bristling with the intent to obliterate. They spoke in a language the humans couldn't understand, their massive, metallic warships descending onto Earth's surface with unrelenting fury. The Kramari's goal was simple: wipe out humanity before it had a chance to rise. But something unexpected happened. The humans, though weak in comparison to the mighty Kramari, fought back. Their methods were unrefined, their weapons primitive, and their technology nowhere near the Kramari's level. But they had something the Kramari could not have predicted: sheer, unrelenting determination. The first human counterattack was launched by a coalition of planetary defense fleets made up of Earth's own naval forces and a few scattered colonies. The Kramari easily decimated them, wiping out entire fleets in a matter of hours. However, despite the crushing defeat, humanity did not cower. Instead, they adapted. They learned. The Kramari had underestimated the one thing humans had in abundance: resourcefulness. While their own empire was built on brute force, humanity fought with ingenuity, and this would be their greatest weapon. In the shadows, a group of scientists and engineers, led by Dr. Lena Vasquez, a brilliant physicist with a knack for reverse engineering alien technology, began to devise a plan. They studied the remnants of the Kramari ships, learning their weaknesses. In a matter of months, the humans had discovered a way to neutralize the Kramari's seemingly indestructible shields and energy-based weapons. It was a breakthrough, but it came at a cost. Humanity's first successful strike against a Kramari battleship was small, a single missile targeting a weak point in their shields. But it worked. The Kramari ship was crippled, and the humans had their first taste of victory. That small victory would be the spark that ignited the flames of a revolution. The humans weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting for the future of the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez and her team continued their work, developing new technologies faster than the Kramari could react. They built new types of weapons, stealth ships, and automated drones. Soon, the humans had developed their own fleet, capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Kramari Empire. The tide was turning. What had started as a desperate, hopeless defense was now a coordinated counteroffensive. Humanity, once considered the weakest species in the galaxy, was beginning to show the Kramari that they had underestimated them in every way. They might not have had the strength or the numbers, but they had the will to win, and that was enough. Across the galaxy, the cry for help rang out, and the other empires, watching in awe as the humans fought back, began to realize that the Kramari were not invincible. As the humans made their stand, they became the symbol of hope for all oppressed species across the stars. The weakest species were proving that even the greatest empires could be brought to their knees. The galaxy was changing, and it was only the beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps on a path that would lead them to the stars, and perhaps to victory. The war was far from over, but the humans were no longer just defending their home. They were shaping the future of the galaxy itself. The first taste of victory had sparked a fire that would not be easily extinguished. Humanity, with its newfound technology and raw determination, began organizing a full-scale rebellion against the Krumari Empire. What had once been a defensive war, a struggle for survival, was now rapidly transforming into a campaign for liberation. Dr. Lena Vesquez's groundbreaking work had drawn the attention of the galaxy's oppressed species. The Korna Federation, devastated by the Krumari's wrath, saw the potential for a rebellion. Small colonies of Vorten and Merak, whose empires had bowed to the Krumari's might, began to make contact with humanity, offering support. These species, too, had long yearned for freedom from Krumari oppression but lacked the means to fight back. They now saw a glimmer of hope in the human resistance. Humanity had become the rallying point, the spark that could ignite the fire of rebellion across the stars. Yet, despite the growing support, the road ahead was perilous. The Krumari were no fools. They had not underestimated humanity for long. Their response was swift and brutal, deploying a new class of weaponized battleships, faster and more powerful than anything they had previously used. Their strategy was clear: crush the rebellion before it could spread. But the humans had already adapted. The first engagement between a combined fleet of human and allied ships and the Krumari forces was nothing short of extraordinary. For the first time in the war, the Krumari were on the defensive. The human fleet, equipped with the new anti-shield weapons and stealth technology, managed to break through the Krumari's outer defenses. The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering heavy casualties, but the humans came out victorious. The victory sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. If humanity could stand up to the Krumari and win, then perhaps the rest of the galaxy could too. The Krumari, accustomed to easy victories, began to realize the threat they were facing. They could no longer simply crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. They would have to adapt, or they would lose. The human rebellion grew stronger with each passing day. New allies came forward, and soon, entire fleets of Korna, Vorten, and Merak ships joined the fray. The Krumari, despite their advanced technology and massive military superiority, could not keep up with the growing alliance. The tides were turning. But with every victory came a cost. Humanity, though resourceful, was still outnumbered. The combined fleet of humans and their allies lacked the resources to maintain the war effort indefinitely. Ships were lost in battle, colonies were destroyed, and morale began to waver. It became clear that, if they were to defeat the Krumari Empire, the rebels needed a decisive blow, one that could cripple the Krumari's leadership and send them into disarray. And so, the humans began to hatch a daring plan, a direct strike against the Krumari homeworld itself. If they could destroy the heart of the Empire, the Krumari would be forced to surrender. But the operation would be dangerous. The Krumari homeworld, a fortress planet surrounded by impenetrable defenses, was nearly impossible to penetrate. Yet, humanity had something the Krumari lacked: a willingness to sacrifice everything for the cause. Dr. Vesquez, working in the shadows with a small team of engineers and military strategists, developed a plan to infiltrate the Krumari's most heavily guarded facility, a research station where the Krumari's most secret weapons were being developed. The objective was clear: destroy the research and cripple the Krumari's technological superiority. The mission was risky, and the odds of success were slim. But the humans had come a long way since their first battle. They had learned how to strike with precision, how to take advantage of the smallest weaknesses in their enemies. The Krumari had made the fatal mistake of underestimating humanity, and now, the humans would use that very arrogance against them. As the rebel fleet gathered for the assault, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Krumari might have been the greatest power in the stars, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. In the dark corners of the galaxy, The fire of rebellion burned brighter than ever, and the Kromari Empire was about to learn that the smallest spark could indeed set the universe ablaze. The rebellion's plans were now in motion. Every fleet, every ship, every soldier had been gathered for one mission: to strike the heart of the Kromari Empire. The target was Kromari Prime, the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy. The planet's surface was a nightmare of militarized cities, sprawling fortresses, and enormous defense grids that rendered conventional attacks useless. But the humans were prepared to use every advantage they had gained. In the wake of their victory against the Kromari fleet, the combined rebel forces, now consisting of human, Korna, Vorten, and Merak ships, formed a war council. Dr. Lena Vasquez and Admiral Raydan, a Korna commander known for his unyielding determination, took the lead in planning the assault. Their goal was to destroy the Kromari's central military command center, buried deep beneath the surface of their homeworld. If they succeeded, it would destabilize the entire empire, forcing the Kromari to abandon their pursuit of galactic domination. The plan was as audacious as it was dangerous. The rebel fleet would split into two parts. The first would engage the Kromari's outer defenses, drawing their attention and pulling their forces away from the planet's core. The second, a smaller, more specialized force, would infiltrate the heavily protected research station hidden beneath the surface, where the Kromari were developing new weapons that could alter the balance of power. As the fleet approached Kromari Prime, the tension was palpable. Every member of the War Council knew the risks. If they failed, it would mean the end of the rebellion and potentially the extinction of their species. The initial battle was brutal. The rebel ships, outfitted with newly developed cloaking devices and advanced weaponry, engaged the Kromari defense forces in a series of skirmishes that would be remembered for centuries. The Kromari's superior numbers and firepower nearly overwhelmed the rebel fleet, but the humans, led by their brilliant tactics and relentless determination, managed to outmaneuver their foes at every turn. But the true danger was still ahead. Kromari Prime's surface defenses were impenetrable, and the final objective was buried deep within the planet. As the rebel fleet's decoy forces drew attention away from the planet, a small squadron of specially trained human and allied operatives, including Dr. Vasquez herself, descended onto the surface in stealth transports. Their mission: to breach the Kromari underground facility and disable their most dangerous weapons. The journey to the facility was harrowing. The team navigated through the dark, labyrinthine tunnels of Kromari Prime, avoiding patrols of the Kromari elite soldiers, hulking, genetically enhanced warriors known for their brutal efficiency in combat. Despite their superior strength, the rebels had the advantage of surprise, and their stealth tactics allowed them to slip past the enemy undetected. As they neared the heart of the facility, Dr. Vasquez's mind raced. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The Kromari had been working on a devastating new weapon, an artificial intelligence capable of controlling entire fleets and rapidly adapting to enemy tactics. If the weapon was activated, it would be an unstoppable force, one that could decimate the rebellion and crush any hope of victory. The team finally reached the facility's core, where the Kromari were preparing to deploy the weapon. Time was running out. Dr. Vasquez and her team fought their way into the central command room, where they encountered the weapon, an enormous, complex machine, surrounded by rows of glowing data terminals and Kromari scientists. The room erupted in chaos as the rebels engaged the Kromari defenders, but they were outnumbered. With minutes to spare, Dr. Vasquez, using her knowledge of Kromari technology, managed to interface with the machine and trigger a system shutdown. The weapon went offline, and the Kromari's advantage evaporated. But the victory came at a steep price. The facility began to self-destruct, and the rebels had mere seconds to escape. The team raced through the collapsing tunnels, barely making it to their escape transports in time. The facility, now in ruins, would no longer serve as a threat to the rebellion. The Kromari, though shaken by the loss, had no idea how close they had come to annihilation. As the rebels made their way back to the fleet, victorious but bloodied, the reality of the victory began to sink in. They had dealt a blow to the Kromari Empire that would be felt across the galaxy. But the war was far from over. The Kromari were a wounded animal now, dangerous, and unpredictable. And the humans knew that they could not rest until their enemy was defeated once and for all. The siege of Cromari Prime had been the turning point in the war. Humanity had proved that even against overwhelming odds, they could strike decisively, adapt quickly, and outsmart their foes. It was a lesson the Cromari would soon learn. The weakest species had become the most formidable enemy the galaxy had ever known. And they were just getting started. In the aftermath of the devastating blow dealt to Cromari Prime, the Rebel Alliance reveled in their triumph, though the victory was bittersweet. Dr. Lena Vasquez and her team had managed to disable the Cromari's most dangerous weapon, a feat that should have crippled the Empire's ability to wage war. The Alliance's forces were stronger than ever, bolstered by new technologies, new allies, and an unwavering belief that they could win. The rebellion now controlled key systems, and many thought the Cromari's reign of terror was finally coming to an end. But the Cromari were not so easily defeated. The Empire, though shaken, was not broken. They had always prided themselves on their resilience, and now that pride would prove to be their greatest weapon. In the darkest reaches of space, the Cromari military elite regrouped under the command of Lord Malgar, the Empire's most feared general. Malgar, a cold and calculating strategist, had lost no love for the humans, but he understood one truth above all others. The Cromari Empire would not survive if it remained fractured. They had lost Cromari Prime, yes, but their true strength lay in their ability to adapt, to reforge themselves into a new weapon capable of wiping out the rebellion once and for all. In the weeks following the destruction of the research facility, the Cromari began to implement a new strategy, a strategy of annihilation. They would no longer fight piecemeal. They would send everything they had at once, with the sole purpose of obliterating the rebels. Their fleets, previously scattered, began to consolidate, growing larger and more fearsome with each passing day. Their new flagship, the Cromarax, was a terrifying behemoth, capable of outmatching anything in the rebel fleet. The Alliance, too, knew that the next phase of the war would be decisive. The recent victories had emboldened them, but they understood that they had only one chance to turn the tide. If they couldn't strike a crippling blow to the Cromari military soon, the Empire would consolidate its power and push them back into the darkness. The battlefield was set, the stakes higher than ever. Humanity and its allies prepared for what would become known as the Battle of the Shattered Suns, a conflict that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Cromari, now determined to teach their enemies a lesson in humility, began their march to reclaim the systems they had lost, and to crush the rebellion once and for all. The rebel forces, despite their recent successes, were still fighting a desperate war. Ships were constantly being refitted, and morale began to waver as the war dragged on. Even with Dr. Vasquez's innovations and the help of their allies, they were still outgunned and outnumbered. Yet there was a sense of unity that had not existed before, a sense that they had become more than the sum of their parts. The rebellion was no longer just humanity's fight. It was a fight for the survival of every oppressed species in the galaxy. The first confrontation came as the Cromari fleet arrived in the Skea system, a strategically important hub that served as a staging ground for rebel operations. The rebel fleet, led by Admiral Raydan, deployed every resource they had in an attempt to hold the line. The battle was fierce and unforgiving. The Cromari Cromarax unleashed waves of firepower that shattered the rebel forces, but humanity's ingenuity kept them in the fight. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans used hit-and-run tactics, launching surprise attacks from the shadows and inflicting damage wherever they could. But it became clear that the Cromari were not fighting in the same way anymore. They had adapted. They had learned from their earlier mistakes. The rebel tactics that had once been so effective were no longer enough. The Cromari had perfected their response, anticipating every move the rebels made. The human fleet was being picked apart piece by piece, and the Alliance was beginning to lose ground. In the midst of the battle, a critical decision was made. Dr. Vasquez, watching the destruction unfold from the rebel command ship, realized that the time for conventional warfare was over. The humans needed to make a drastic move, one that would change the course of the war. Using an experimental technology they had been developing in secret, a device capable of disabling entire fleets by disrupting their communication and coordination systems, Dr. Vasquez and her team set out to infiltrate the Cromari flagship. The mission was risky, but it offered a slim chance of survival for the rebellion. If they could disable the Cromarax' command systems, they could throw the entire Cromari fleet into disarray. The plan was set into motion. A small group of elite operatives, led by Captain Alara Hayes, was sent to infiltrate the flagship. As the rebel fleet continued to engage the Cromari in a desperate fight, Hayes and her team made their way aboard the Cromarax through a series of stealthy maneuvers. Their objective was simple: get to the heart of the Cromari command center and activate the disruption device before they were caught. As they made their way through the Cromari ship, the tension was unbearable. Each moment felt like it could be their last. They faced enemies on every side, but the human resolve kept them focused. When they finally reached the control room, Hayes planted the device, and the countdown began. But as the team prepared to escape, disaster struck. The Cromari had anticipated this move. A squad of Cromari soldiers, aware of the intrusion, ambushed the rebels in the control room. The rebels fought valiantly, but the odds were against them. Captain Hayes was gravely injured in the firefight, and just as the team was about to be overwhelmed, the device activated. The Cromari fleet fell into chaos. Communication systems went dark, and the Cromari flagship's weapon systems were suddenly offline. Rebel ships took advantage of the opportunity, launching a final assault on the disoriented Cromari forces. The battle raged for hours, but the humans had seized their moment. The Cromari, now unable to coordinate their forces, were overwhelmed by the rebellious fury they had underestimated for so long. The Cromarax was destroyed, along with a significant portion of the Cromari fleet. It was a victory born from desperation, but it had shifted the balance of power once again. The Cromari Empire had lost its greatest warship, and the Rebel Alliance had struck a critical blow. But the war was not yet over, and the Cromari, though reeling, were far from defeated. The rebellion was on the cusp of victory, but they had learned the hard way that no victory comes without sacrifice. The Battle of the Shattered Suns had been a turning point. The Cromari Empire, once thought invincible, had been dealt a devastating blow. The destruction of the Cromarax and the disruption of their fleet's coordination systems left the Empire scrambling for a way to reassert control over its crumbling territories. But even as their vast war machine faltered, the Cromari leadership refused to admit defeat. Lord Malgar, their brilliant but ruthless general, would stop at nothing to restore his empire's dominance. In the aftermath of the battle, the Rebel Alliance stood on the precipice of victory. The Cromari had suffered substantial losses, but they still controlled vast portions of the galaxy. The Allied forces, humans, Korna, Vorton, and Merak, had their eyes set on a final, decisive strike. Yet, they knew that one last, final blow was needed to break the Cromari's resolve and cripple their ability to fight back. The key was the Cromari capital, a fortress planet known as Cromari Prime, where the Empire's last-ditch defenses and command centers were located. Admiral Raydan, who had proven himself a master tactician in battle, understood that they could not afford to wait any longer. The Cromari Empire was teetering on the edge, and the time had come to push them over it. The Rebel Alliance began to assemble its forces for one final assault. However, Dr. Lena Vasquez, ever the realist, feared that an all-out attack on Cromari Prime might not be enough. The Cromari, having learned from their mistakes, had turned Cromari Prime into an impenetrable stronghold. The planet's surface was covered in massive anti-orbital defense grids, and the Cromari had developed a new class of weapons that could wipe out fleets in a single stroke. Their most terrifying new development was a superweapon capable of targeting entire star systems, an energy weapon of such destructive power that it could wipe out entire fleets in moments. The stakes could not be higher. With no time to waste, Dr. Vasquez began working on a bold new strategy, an infiltration mission deep into the heart of the Cromari Empire. The idea was simple: bypass the planet's formidable defenses and take out the Cromari leadership before they could activate the superweapon. The mission would require the best and brightest the rebellion had to offer, and only the most experienced operatives could be trusted with such a delicate operation. Captain Alara Hayes, still recovering from her injuries sustained during the Cromarax operation, was once again called upon to lead the mission. This time, however, the stakes were even higher. If the Cromari leadership remained intact, they could rally their forces and launch a counteroffensive that would undo all the progress the Alliance had made. Hayes, driven by the memory of her fallen comrades, was more than ready to finish what they had started. The infiltration team, composed of elite soldiers, engineers, and strategists, launched their operation under the cover of darkness. Using a combination of advanced stealth technology and precise military tactics, they breached Cromari Prime's heavily fortified perimeter. It was a dangerous mission that required them to navigate through miles of crumbling cities and underground bunkers to reach the heart of the Cromari Command Center. But as the team advanced deeper into the planet's core, they soon realized that the Cromari were not as disorganized as they had believed. The rebellion's successes had forced the Cromari to adopt new, brutal tactics, and their capital was now surrounded by elite forces trained to eliminate any threat. Every step the rebels took was contested, and soon, they were fighting not only the Cromari soldiers, but their own doubt as well. The team's progress slowed as they encountered more and more opposition. The Cromari, despite their losses, still had overwhelming numbers. The rebels had to fight tooth and nail just to maintain a foothold, with casualties mounting. Still, they pressed forward, knowing that the fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. Meanwhile, on the surface of Cromari Prime, the Cromari's leadership had gathered to activate their superweapon, a last-ditch attempt to restore their power. Lord Malgar stood at the helm, directing the final preparations for the weapon's activation. The superweapon was designed to fire across entire star systems, wiping out entire fleets in the blink of an eye. The Cromari, confident that their enemies would never be able to reach them in time, prepared to unleash their ultimate weapon. But the rebels were not done yet. As the clock ticked down to the weapon's activation, Captain Hayes and her team infiltrated the command center. They fought through waves of Cromari soldiers and, just as the superweapon was primed to fire, they reached the control room. In a desperate attempt to disable the weapon, Hayes and Dr. Vasquez worked in tandem, using a combination of human ingenuity and advanced Cromari technology to sabotage the weapon's systems. The superweapon, once thought unstoppable, powered down, and Cromari Prime was plunged into chaos. With the weapon disabled and the leadership thrown into disarray, the rebel forces seized the moment. The Cromari forces, now leaderless and without a means to launch their devastating counterattack, began to crumble. The rebellion launched a full-scale assault, overwhelming the weakened defenses and finally breaking through to the heart of Cromari Prime. The Cromari Empire, once a galactic behemoth, was on the brink of collapse. The final blow had been struck. But as the rebels celebrated their hard-won victory, they knew the road ahead would be difficult. The war might be nearly over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The Cromari's downfall had created a power vacuum, one that would be filled by the many factions who had long been oppressed. The rebels would have to rebuild what had been broken, forging a new future for the galaxy from the ashes of the old. For humanity and its allies, the war had not only been about survival, it had been about proving that even the weakest species could change the fate of the stars. And as the rebellion's flag flew high above the ruins of Cromari Prime, they knew that the future was theirs to shape. The fall of Cromari Prime had shattered the Cromari Empire's grip on the galaxy, but it was only the beginning of a new chapter in the aftermath of the war. With the Empire's leadership in ruins and their military crushed, the power vacuum left behind was immense and dangerous. A delicate peace now hung over the galaxy, as various factions scrambled for control, each hoping to take the place of the once dominant Cromari. In the rebel strongholds, leaders from every corner of the galaxy gathered to discuss the future. The rebellion, once united by a single goal, defeating the Cromari, now found itself facing a more complicated question: what came next? There was no longer a common enemy to rally against, and the forces that had united under the banner of resistance were beginning to splinter. Dr. Lena Vasquez, now recognized as one of the primary architects of the rebellion's victory, found herself in the midst of a growing political storm. Though the alliance had successfully toppled the Cromari, no one had anticipated the fractured nature of the galaxy after their fall. The various species that had joined forces against the Empire had different ideas about what the future should look like. The Korna, a proud warrior race, were eager to assert their dominance over the now-defunct Cromari territories. The Vorten, ever the cautious diplomats, sought stability and peace, desiring to avoid further conflict. And the Merak, a species once enslaved by the Cromari, now yearned for retribution and autonomy. Vasquez had never intended to be a leader, but with her sharp mind and undeniable influence, she found herself at the center of a delicate political balance. It was clear to her that the galaxy was on the verge of fracturing into endless conflicts as each faction attempted to assert its own control. If a unified galaxy was to emerge from the ashes, she would need to find a way to keep the peace. The task before her was monumental. Admiral Raydan, ever the warrior, was skeptical. He had fought alongside the rebels through every battle, and now he wanted to ensure that the Cromari threat could never rise again. But his desire for a strong military presence in the galaxy was at odds with the more peaceful factions who sought to rebuild. Raydan was not one for politics. He was a soldier, and his instincts told him that the best way to ensure security was through strength. He feared that without a strong hand to guide the galaxy, the endless cycles of war would continue, and they would all be consumed by it. Meanwhile, Captain Alara Hayes, recovering from her injuries, had been grappling with the loss of so many of her comrades. The sacrifice and the pain weighed heavily on her heart, and she was torn between her loyalty to the rebellion and the moral cost of their victory. Her heart ached for the fallen, and she wondered whether all the bloodshed had been worth it. She believed that they had a chance to forge something better from the wreckage of the old galaxy, but she was unsure of how they could truly heal the wounds that ran so deep. As the Alliance bickered over the future, one thing became clear. The galaxy was entering an age of uncertainty. Old powers were crumbling, and new ones were rising to take their place. Within this turbulent environment, a new threat began to stir. In the outer reaches of the galaxy, a mysterious faction had begun to emerge, one that none of the rebel forces had anticipated. This group, known as the Ascendant, claimed to be the last remaining loyalists to the Cromari Empire. They had kept to the shadows during the war, avoiding direct conflict with the rebellion. But with the Empire's fall, they saw an opportunity to restore the Cromari's former glory, not as an empire, but as a new, terrifying order. The Ascendant were not like the Cromari, who had fought the rebellion. They were a darker, more dangerous faction, a group of elite soldiers, engineers, and rogue leaders who had once been close to the heart of the Cromari military. They believed that the galaxy needed a new, more ruthless power to restore balance, and they were willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. It was only a matter of time before the Ascendant began making their presence felt. They first struck in the distant Ralcora system, where they seized control of a large fleet of abandoned Cromari warships. With their new arsenal, they began to strike at vulnerable systems, taking out rebel-controlled stations and reasserting their influence in the Outer Rim. Their attacks were swift, calculated, and devastating. Dr. Vasquez, who had hoped for a peaceful rebuilding, found herself once again thrust into the heart of a war she had fought so hard to end. The Ascendant were far more dangerous than any Cromari force the rebellion had ever faced. They had access to advanced Cromari technologies, including weapons and ship designs the rebels had never even seen. Worse still, the Ascendant had a single-minded vision to restore the Cromari Empire, but with themselves at its helm. As the Ascendant made their move, Dr. Vasquez reached out to the various factions that had once been part of the rebellion. She knew that, despite their differences, they would need to unite once more if they had any hope of stopping this new threat. The stage was set for another galactic conflict, one that would test the unity of the galaxy's newly formed alliance. The factions that had once fought together would have to put aside their differences and stand against the Ascendant. For Dr. Vasquez, the path ahead was unclear, but she understood one thing. The The galaxy was on the brink of another war, and it would take everything they had to stop the Ascendant from plunging the galaxy back into darkness. The rebellion had won the war against the Kramari Empire, but the battle for the future of the galaxy was only just beginning. The galaxy stood at the precipice once more. The Ascendant had proven themselves to be a ruthless and cunning adversary, quickly re-establishing a terrifying grip on the outer rim and threatening to destabilize the fragile peace that had taken root in the wake of the Kramari Empire's fall. Their message was clear. The old order was gone, and they were the only ones capable of bringing true stability through strength. But they weren't just trying to conquer the galaxy. They were determined to reshape it entirely, with themselves at the helm. As the Ascendant expanded their influence, chaos spread like wildfire. Colonies that had once flourished under the protection of the rebellion now found themselves at the mercy of the new faction's brutal tactics. Systems that had been liberated from the Kramari yoke were slipping back into oppression. The fragile alliances between the different species of the rebellion seemed on the verge of unraveling, and many feared that the galaxy was once again on the brink of total war. Dr. Lena Vasquez, now at the center of the galactic struggle, knew the time for negotiation and rebuilding was over. Despite her deep desire to see the galaxy move beyond endless conflict, she realized that to stop the Ascendant, they would have to fight harder and smarter than they ever had before. The rebellion, still scarred from the battle with the Kramari, would need to be reforged into something stronger, something capable of facing a threat unlike anything they had ever encountered. The first step was to unite the fractured factions. The Korna, led by their fierce warlords, were ready for battle, but they demanded action, rapid and unrelenting. The Vorten, cautious as ever, still hesitated to fully commit. And the Merak, hungry for revenge, stood poised to strike, but they were divided on how to proceed. Dr. Vasquez convened a summit, desperate to bring together the leaders of the rebellion and rally them against the Ascendant threat. Admiral Radan, who had always believed in the power of military strength, led the call for a full-scale invasion of the Ascendant's strongholds. But Captain Alara Hayes, still haunted by the cost of past wars, warned that they would need more than firepower. They would need to outthink the Ascendant, exploiting their weaknesses rather than just meeting them in battle. As the summit dragged on, tensions were high. It seemed as though the galaxy was once again poised for a civil war among its own liberators. That was until the moment when Vasquez, who had remained mostly silent, stood and spoke the words that shifted the course of the rebellion forever. "We cannot afford to fight as we once did," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "The Ascendant are not just another army to defeat. They are a new breed, born from the ashes of the Kramari. We can't just defeat them with might. We must outlast them. We must show the galaxy that we are more than just the sum of our forces. We are more than just an army of different species. We are the galaxy's future. And if we can prove that, we can defeat them." Her words struck a chord with the leaders gathered around the table. For the first time since the rebellion's victory, they recognized that this new fight would require more than just tactical brilliance. It would require unity, not just in force, but in spirit. The very thing that had made the rebellion such a powerful force was its diversity, its shared dream of a galaxy where every species could thrive. With a renewed sense of purpose, the rebellion forged a new coalition, a united front determined to face the Ascendant head-on. The Korna warlords, now unified under a single banner, pledged their fleets. The Vorten sent their finest diplomats and engineers to coordinate with the rebels. The Merak, though driven by vengeance, agreed to channel their anger into a focused strike against the Ascendant. In the heart of the Ascendant stronghold, Lord Malgar, the true leader of the faction, watched with growing concern as the rebellion's forces gathered. His confidence, built on years of manipulation and fear, began to waver. The Ascendant were strong, but they lacked the unity that the rebellion now possessed. They were fractured by their own arrogance, believing that their strength alone could carry them to victory. The time for reckoning came when Dr. Vasquez, along with Admiral Radan and Captain Hayes, led the United Fleet on a final, desperate mission to infiltrate the heart of the Ascendant's defenses. Their goal was simple: destroy the heart of the Ascendant network and cut off their ability to coordinate. But this time, it wasn't just about brute force, it was about strategy, deception, and unity. The Ascendant had grown overconfident in their technological superiority, but they had failed to account for the rebels' newfound resolve. The battle that ensued was unlike any other. The rebels used their combined strength to outmaneuver the Ascendant at every turn. Dr. Vasquez's brilliant plan to cripple the Ascendant's central command was executed flawlessly as she worked alongside engineers and soldiers to breach the main command center deep within the heart of their base. As their flagship began to crumble under the weight of the rebellion's assault, the Ascendant found themselves trapped in a web of their own making. In the final moments of the conflict, Lord Malgar made a last-ditch attempt to activate a doomsday weapon that could have wiped out the galaxy's fleets in one fell swoop. But Captain Hayes, leading a daring strike team, reached the control room just in time to stop him. With Malgar's death, the Ascendant were thrown into disarray. The rebellion had won, not just through force, but through unity, perseverance, and a shared belief in a future beyond endless war. As the dust settled and the victorious fleet made its way home, the leaders of the galaxy stood together. Korna, Vorton, Merak, and human alike, finally united under the banner of peace. The galaxy was scarred, yes, but it was still alive. Dr. Vasquez looked out into the vastness of space, knowing that though the war had ended, the work of rebuilding the galaxy was just beginning. And this time, they would build it together. The dawn of a new era had come, and for the first time, it felt like hope, true hope, was within their reach.